Hey guys, it is an all new month, which means it's a new opportunity for us to dive into all new stories. And I'm pretty excited about our May TBR just because I think it's the most eclectic that we've had so far this year. So I'm pretty excited about that. But before we dive into those books, I wanted to take a look back at April and take you guys through all the books that I was able to read this month and then give you my rating and review for each of those books. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the first book I read this month, I actually read on Kindle, and this was a carryover from March. I mentioned it in my last video, or my March recap video, and that book was Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And I told you guys in my last video that I was loving the book and I had a good feeling about it, and I ended up absolutely loving that book. In fact, it was one of my 5 stars for this month. I rated that book a 5-star. I loved it so much. Once I was able to kind of sit down and settle into the story and take my way through it, it was just so good. I fell in love with Eleanor and just watching her journey. I think Gail did such a great job of a masterclass in character development. Let me back up. So if you guys don't know what the story of Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, it follows the main character named Eleanor. She's a 28-year-old woman. She's kind of working a mundane job. She has a very mundane day-to-day kind of routine. Go to work, go home alone, drink a bunch of vodka, order pizza, and then spend her weekend doing the same thing, rinse and repeat. She doesn't really have a ton of friends. She doesn't interact with people, but she's totally fine with the way her life is going. And that being the pattern of her life, she is a little socially awkward, like you see in a lot of instances where she's interacting with people, where she just doesn't pick up on certain social cues, or she doesn't really know how to react or respond to people. So she comes across a little awkward. But it's following her as, she's going through life, and then her life kind of gets shaken up, but in a good way, when she meets the guy who works in IT at her company. His name is Ray. And she reluctantly strikes up conversation with him and gets to a point where they're kind of walking home. They happen to cross paths on their way home from work one day, and they witness a man who has a medical emergency. His name is Sam. And then from there, the story kind of unfolds as Sam and Ray sort of enter into Eleanor's lives in some sort of capacity. And then you see how she just starts to develop and change. And that's what I was saying when, I think this was such a great example of character development. You start off, we see a bunch of different instances where if I came across Eleanor in real life, I would probably think she was annoying. While some of her humor was very funny, I will give you that, but it's just she would say the most outlandish things. She was the type of person who would say the first thing that would come to her mind without really thinking about how those words would affect people or impact people. She doesn't really consider other people. And to watch her throughout the book as because she's starting to interact and develop this friendship with Ray and to some extent Sam, it's forcing her to look at other facets and other elements of her life and really take stock of how she moves through life, how she considers other people, then kind of unfolding a lot of the grief that she's been, and I don't want to give away too much of the book, but you discover that there's this level of grief that she's been pushing down and suppressing her whole life that has really had a really big impact into why she is the way she is today. And just seeing her become more conscious of that, doing the work, doing the unpacking, but then going through the really hard parts of it too, was just so beautiful to watch this person grow. And then by the time you get to the end of this book, you've had it all. You've had your laughs, you've had your tears. You love Ray because you the type of person that Ray is, that he is really willing to accept Eleanor for who she is, but it was also has a really big hand in helping her grow and evolve without him necessarily I don't think he truly realized the impact that he had on Eleanor until you kind of get to the end of the story. But it was just so good. It's one of those books that I definitely think I will go back maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, where I'm I think I want to read the story again and just unpack it. It definitely takes you on an emotional ride. Gail just did such a good job of creating this character and writing this person. I can't say enough good things about it. My sister was one of the people who recommended this book to me. And as soon as I finished it, I called her and I was like, yes, absolutely. It's a 5-star. We talked about it. We dissected pretty much every facet of this book that we could because she also loved it so much. This was a 5-star for me. It was a great way to kick off the month. And I think it was part of the reason that kind of led me into the rest of this month because, dare I say it, I think April has been the best reading month that I've had so far, in at least the last 6 or 7 months. This is the best reading month I've had. To the point where I had two 5 stars this month. Eleanor Oliphant was the other one, and then I'll tell you guys the next one later on. But yeah, loved it. Absolutely would recommend it. The next book I read this month was another very popular book. That book is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And again, I loved this book. I thought, like, going into it, knowing that it kind of had that Hunger Game vibe to it, this one had so many elements to it that differentiated it from the book. I think I was able to kind of separate the Hunger Games-ness from this book, and I think it helped me like it a lot more. Like, there's a lot of Game of Thrones style, political infighting, which added another element to it. I think the fact that it, takes place in outer space added another element there, and just the visuals, like the way Pierce was able to kind of set the scene to where you felt like you were in a lot of these locations, really helped me immerse myself into the story. This character, Darrow, I'm so excited to continue following along with him because it very much is kind of like what he's going through. Like, I like that Pierce kind of takes you into him as a character, and you're seeing this sort of moral battle that Darrow has with himself at times, to where he's meant to be, in more ways than not, he's meant to be the hero of this story, but he does come across as very morally gray in some of the decisions that he makes throughout the books. Like, there was times in the books where he would do things and I would be like, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know if I would handle it that way. Or, this seems a little selfish. Like, are you sure you're still on this path of righteousness and you're doing this for the right reasons? So I love a conflicted hero. I love a hero that's not necessarily like, Superman or cookie cutter. He had this complexity to him, and kind of fighting this internal battle. And I think that also reminded me too a little bit of Dune. And if you guys aren't familiar with Dune, the main character in that book, his name's that series is Paul Atreides, and it's kind of a similar thing where, like, he is this hero, and I say hero for lack of a better word, but he is this protagonist who sort of has these expectations and these destinies that are more or less placed on him, and he feels an obligation to kind of fulfill that because he's doing it for his people, he's doing it for his family, but it's not necessarily something that he probably would have set out to do on his own if these expectations or prophecies or whatever the case were set on him. And with Paul Atreides, you see a similar thing too, where he's having this moral dilemma where you kind of at points like question, like, well, is he good or is he not? And that's the same feeling and same vibe that I got with Darrow. And again, I love that kind of storytelling in a main character where there is that moral dilemma. Like, at their core, they're good and they're trying to do things for good, but sometimes their decision making will stray them from the path. So I'm very excited about this. This was my second 5-star read of the month. I absolutely love this book. This book was ruthless. Like, no one was safe, which is why it was very Hunger Games, Game of Thrones-esque. Like, there was just stuff happening all the time, and I couldn't anticipate. There was no way for me to anticipate what was coming up next, and I really liked that about this book. So yeah, it was a 5-star for me. I am absolutely going to be reading the rest of this series, at least the next 2. I know there's 6 books in this series, but I heard that you only really have to, if you wanted to end it after the 3rd one, then it would be like a well-rounded story. So I am going to commit to at least reading the next 2. So I'm going to read Golden Sun next. But yeah, I really liked this book. I had a great time reading this book. You just go through so much reading this, but it was very, very good. The next book I read this month was also a really great book. I'm not going to spend too much time going into this one because I did do a reading blog on this one. And if you haven't seen it, make sure you check it out. I'll link it right here. But that book was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. And if you've seen my reading blog, again, if you haven't, go see it. And also, while you're there, make sure you like and subscribe because I didn't tell you to do that earlier. So like and subscribe. But yeah, I went through it reading this book. Like, it was one of those books where, again, with the main character, it was, I don't even want to say it was a complex character. She just sucked. Like, the main character in this book was a horrible person. And typically, I was just saying how I like main characters who are a little bit morally complex, morally gray, but they still have to have like some sort of goodness like rooted in them in order for me to like this character or try to understand or empathize with some of the more gray decisions that they made. But this main character, June, she just sucked. Like, she was there was nothing redeeming about this woman. She was a horrible, horrible, horrible person. And yeah, I loved it. I love that it really leaned into the awfulness of this person, but I think her obliviousness and her obtuseness and sort of like this savior complex that she had was just so infuriating. It was like at every point where she was doing something that you as a reader can detect, like, no, you're in the wrong here, like you are morally wrong in every facet of the way. She would find a way to kind of twist it to make herself the victim when it was to her benefit, and to make herself the hero when it was to her benefit. But when, you know, similar situations would be faced with the other minority characters, she'd find a way to turn it and make it into their fault or the reason why they were going through whatever plight they were. And yeah, it was very infuriating to read. But I think if you go into it knowing that you're not supposed to like the main character, you're going to take away the moral of the story. Like, you will absolutely get the moral of the story, and it ends in a very realistic way, which I think I really liked. Going into this, I was kind of reading it like, oh, I can't wait for her to get like this horrible like comeuppance, and like she gets her karma in the most outlandish way. And I won't give you the ending of the book, but I think the way R.F. Kuang kind of landed the plane on this one is probably more true to life than we would all probably care to admit. And it was very good. It was very good. I did rate this a 4-star. The only reason, I think it was probably more like a 4.5-star for me. I think the only reason why I didn't rate it a 5-star was there were at times where it started to feel a little bit repetitive, but I understood the reason for it. Like, there were things that June was doing. It just kind of felt like, okay, she's doing the same thing over and over. But I think it was to drive home the main point of the book. So I understood. I knew it was there for a reason, but I just felt like, okay, there were a couple of times where it just started to lull just slightly, but then it picked itself back up in terms of like carrying along the story. But I would absolutely recommend this book to someone. This was a great read. I enjoyed it. It infuriated me. But it was good to read. After reading Yellowface, I did want to switch it up and read something that was a little bit more on the fantastical, like fantasy side, or dark academia, if you will. And I fear that after reading this book, I might be V.E. Schwab's new stan, because the girl can write. I told you guys before how much I loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So I decided to pick up Vicious. Guys, I loved this book. It was so good. I think I might have to read everything that V.E. Schwab has written. I truly might have to. Vicious was so good. So if you guys don't know what this book is about, and again, I did talk about this in my April TBR, but it follows 2 college students, Eli and Victor, and you know, they're in college and they're testing out their thesis. And essentially the thesis is that when in life or death situations, your body can create kind of like a physical change. Like, the adrenaline in your body will pump so hard that it will create a physical change as you essentially die and come back to life, and it will cause you to have supernatural abilities. So as they're obviously, you know, researching this thesis, they kind of take it one step too far and they start to test the thesis. And then coming out of that thesis, this is where we kind of follow the story unfold, and there's a lot of, you know, supernatural abilities to it. And then you're kind of following this conflict between Eli and Victor as they sort of take 2 separate stances on this thesis that they've been able to prove. And yeah, I really loved it. I think it was, again, this was a book that was very ruthless. I did not, similar to Red Rising, I was not able to really anticipate what was coming next. Every time I thought I knew what was going to happen, it didn't happen. And then again, it was another example of liking morally complex character or morally gray characters. I definitely liked Victor more. He was the more morally gray of the other 2. And then you have Eli, who was a character who very much so had this God complex, but was a villain. Like, but didn't think he was, because he had this God complex. He was so fixated on what he thought was right and true, and it was so far off. But I think the main thing that I liked about this book and that kept me kind of into this book was the way V.E. Schwab tells the story. Like, we jump between different points in time throughout the story, but it's all kind of told in one through line. So as you're jumping through different points in time, when you're at a specific point in time, everything that she's telling you is for a reason, because you're going to jump into the future, and then it's whatever you just saw in the past is going to impact what you're reading in the future. Or when you jump into the past, whatever you're reading next is going to impact what you're seeing in the future. So you're kind of getting like all the backstory and the present story at the same time. And I think it was just so masterfully done the way she told this. You don't get confused at all, because there are quite a few time jumps. Like, there's, every maybe 4 or 5 pages, you're jumping between 10 years in the past, or 6 months between like the main climax of the story, or the day of the climax of the story, or like 30 minutes before the climax of the story. Like, you're definitely jumping around a lot, but it wasn't hard to follow at all, because she did it so intentionally and masterfully that you're able to kind of alternate between those two, but without skipping a beat and without losing any of the plot. I did rate this a 4, and I think the only reason why I rated this a 4, just thinking about the kind of books that people like to read, this one does at times, I think because there's like the supernatural abilities in it, it does give you sort of like superhero, like Marvel kind of comic book vibes in a way, but like think like Daredevil mixed into that a little bit. And I know not everybody likes that. I happen to love stuff like that. I love Marvel. I love not comic books, but I love Marvel. I love those kind of stories. I love superhero stories. I love stuff like that. So it wasn't far off for me. And again, I think the way it was told, it was just unlike anything that I've read before, which was really refreshing. And there's a second one to this book called Vengeance. I think the way this one ended, you definitely makes you want to read the second one. So I will be picking that up very, very soon. I have not been able to see it. I've been to Barnes maybe like 2 or 3 times. I've been to just my local Barnes a couple of times, and they don't have any copies of it. They only have copies of this one left. So eventually I will venture out to another bookstore or another Barnes, and I will buy Vengeful and absolutely read this. But I had such a good time with it. It's not a complicated read. It was a fun read. Definitely action packed. It kept you on your toes. Again, there was no way for me to anticipate, or like every time I tried to hypothesize or like guess what was coming up next, I ended up being completely wrong. And I love that. So V.E. Schwab, I'm afraid you have a newsstand, because girl, I'm reading anything you put out. I'm reading it all. So if you guys have any other V.E. Schwab recommendations that you guys think I should read, definitely let me know. I know there's Darker Shade of Magic. I think that's like a trilogy, so I'll probably be reading that at some point too. But if there's any other V.E. Schwab books that you guys absolutely love and you want me to read, please let me know, because I am living for her. Like, she's so good. Okay, so after reading that, again, so that's 4-star and above. And honestly, the 2 4-stars are probably like 4.5, 4.75. So I was trying to break it up a little bit. I just wanted to take a little bit of a breather and read something kind of like short and snippy. So I did decide to pick up a novella that I found at one of my local bookstores. Actually, it came with a little, I love shopping local. It came with a little a bookmark too. It's called Sidetrack Bookshop. If you guys are in Michigan, like the Detroit area, definitely check them out. It's super cute. They do like I haven't seen it yet, but I know they do like drag queen like readings, where they have like drag queens come in and like read kids books. It's super cute. But I know that they do stuff like that. But definitely check them out if you haven't before. But yeah, the book that I read was called Ballerina by Patrick Modiano. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you see that? Ballerina. I'd never heard of this book before. I was literally just browsing around the bookstore and came across it. And I saw Ballerina and said, why not? This book was originally written in French, so it is translated into English. And it's a novella. It's pretty short. I think it was a little bit over 100 pages. And it's pretty much about a guy who had a relationship with a ballerina in the 1960s. And it's just kind of talking about like his time in Paris in the 1960s, through having this relationship with this ballerina. And so when I originally picked the book up, I'll be honest, I really thought it was going to dive more into the world of ballet in Paris during that time. And I can't really say I got that. It's definitely more so from the perspective of like the outside looking in, like someone who's adjacent to this world, who really wasn't involved with it before, but because he became involved with this ballerina, he kind of ends up haphazardly within her circle of people. But it's like sort of following him as he's like struggling to find his identity in this artsy community. But then also like really struggling to understand like this ballerina who has a really complex history and complex relationships with people and her son. And it was a good book. It just wasn't necessarily what I expected. And I think because it was so short, I didn't have time to really like develop an opinion or like a feeling towards any of these characters. So like when you're kind of seeing some of the things that are happening to them, you're like, okay, and then you really don't get to, I think the way it ended too, I feel like the way the story ended kind of opened it up to where you're like, okay, well, I kind of want to know more. Like, what's this about? So I didn't really love that, but I think it was very well written. I will say that, like, you can tell, I bet it probably reads even better like in the original translation, and that's nothing against who the person who translated Mark Polizzotti. That's nothing against you, but I think when you're if you guys can hear music, it's because I have my windows open and someone's driving by. So sorry. But that's nothing against Mark Polizzotti. I just think like anytime when you're translating something from one language to another, like languages are so complex that there's something that's bound to get lost in translation, just in terms of like the artfulness in what it's told. There's certain nuances or things like that that might be more relatable in French as opposed to English. So I think that probably had something to do with it. I don't know. I guess I probably will not never know, but I won't know anytime soon because I don't speak a lick of French. But I will say again, it was well written for it to be a short story. It still kept me engaged. It just wasn't necessarily what I had initially expected. I thought it was going to be more about the world of ballet, kind of really focusing in on that, and that really wasn't what it was. So overall, I did give this a 3-star. Again, mostly because I just think it was written very well, and the story itself was still relatively interesting. I just wasn't obsessed with it. And the last book that I read this month is going to be, if you guys know me, you know I do carryovers. This book is going to be a carryover into May. So I did start this book. I'm pretty much done with it at this point. I think I have like maybe 4 or 5 more chapters before I finish it. But that book is A Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I fell into it. I bought this book probably in the middle of April with the anticipation of reading it at some point, but I've just been seeing it online so much and people talking about it that I was starting to feel the FOMO. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick it up. I did sacrifice reading. If you guys saw my April TBR and you guys saw how excited I got about reading Legendborn, as you can tell, that clearly didn't happen. But we are going to read Legendborn. I promise. It's getting back, pushed back up to the queue. I just had this one and I was like itching to like read it, so I did decide to start it. And so far I'm really liking it. I really like it so far. If you know anything about the Hunger Games, it's giving everything that it's supposed to give with the Hunger Games. Like, you're going through the reaping, you're going through the parade, the training, and then like the actual games itself. So it's taking you through that kind of like that classic Hunger Games Suzanne Collins formula. But I think the interesting part about this is that obviously you're getting the backstory of a character that you've known and like formed these opinions about from the original trilogy, and it's forcing me to kind of go back, because I will say I like Haymitch, but Haymitch was kind of an ass, like in the Hunger Games, and there were certain things that Haymitch would do, and I'm like, I get it, like, you've been through this traumatic thing in your life. Obviously, he's been through the games. I'm not spoiling anything. Like, if you're a victor, you train other people, so like it's no secret that Haymitch has been through the Hunger Games and won. But it's interesting because like as you're going through the book, there are certain things like, and the way Suzanne is doing it too, it's not like in your face kind of like, oh yeah, here's a drawback to why his character is the way he is, but there's just little hints and little things that she's dropping, just little insights into his personality that kind of help explain and help you empathize with the way that Haymitch is now. And I really like that. And Haymitch has been through a lot. And I think his story in a lot of ways is very, very similar to Katniss. I think the only difference was that obviously when he got reaped versus her getting reaped, you can tell in the book that he's more, not accepting, but more willing to kind of buy into the fact or accept the fact that, okay, these are the cards that I've been dealt. I'm here. I'm going to do what I can to try to survive. So I am going to participate. I'm going to do the things. I'm going to try to create or, find allies. Whereas Katniss was just kind of like, this sucks. I don't want to be here. I hate all of this. I'm not giving into any of this. And yeah, so there's a difference, but there's definitely a lot of similarities between Katniss and Hamish. So I am doing a reading blog on this. If it hasn't been posted yet, it'll probably be posted after this, so you'll get more of my like real-time reactions of reading this. But I'm definitely liking this so far. It's all the emotional damage, because you know there can only be one winner. So I'm at the point where we're at the game, so people are dropping left and right, and it's so sad, but it's good so far. That brings us to the end of today's video. That was all the books that we read for April. Again, it was a really good reading month. I think this month has helped me just kind of get more excited and reinvigorated in terms of reading, because I read so many good books this month. So I'm really excited. It was a very good month. It felt good, especially coming out of a pretty big reading slump at the end of the year, and like just trying my hardest to like slowly climb my way out of it. I could say that after April, I think I am firmly out of it, because I'm just excited to get into all the books that we're reading for May. We've got an eclectic lineup of books to read for May. So that brings us to the end of today's video. That was all the books that we read for April. Again, it was a really good reading month. I think this month has helped me just kind of get more excited and reinvigorated in terms of reading, because I read so many good books this month. So I'm really excited. It was a very good month. It felt good, especially coming out of a pretty big reading slump at the end of the year, and like just trying my hardest to like slowly climb my way out of it. I could say that after April, I think I am firmly out of it, because I'm just excited to get into all the books that we're reading for May. We've got an eclectic lineup of books to read for May as well, so I'm excited to kind of dive into those. I will stop yapping now. That's all I got for you for this video. I appreciate you guys being here. And again, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, comment, let me know if you've read any of the books that we've gone through today. Now that I'm firmly out of this reading slump, if you guys have any recommendations of books that will keep me out of my reading slump and just keep me excited about continuing to read and dive into new stories, please let me know. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one. See you real soon. Bye.